entrepreneurship is very lonely. Nobody cares what you're doing, right? That's a pretty interesting place to be in as an entrepreneur. Like nobody cares what you're doing. Like your family doesn't even care. They're just like, are you making money? Like, are you okay? Like, but they're not going to ask about it or get into it. They don't care, right? And that is a very interesting, kind of crazy place to be in. And so
welcome everyone. Welcome back to another fantastic, and I mean fantastic, episode of Fearless Founders. Today, a friend that I barely get to see. 12 years ago, we got connected. Clint Betts is on. He is in the tech world, particularly in Silicon Slopes, Utah, but around the nation, has had a major influence on anything to do with startups, the actual foundation of how to be successful. And particularly as you are all anxious to learn and grow, Clint is a veritable treasure trove of information and knowledge. Clint has started a couple of businesses himself prior to becoming the lead and the head man for Silicon Slopes versus Silicon Valley. And he's also founded CEO.com. And so with so many years behind the scenes, and for those of you who don't know, in Utah, every year Silicon Slopes has a convention that it brings in all the luminaries, and Clint is the man behind the scenes and in the front in many cases. And so, Clint, we're really excited to have you today and really happy to learn. I am, as well as Ike. Welcome.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much. What an honor to be on, and thank you for what you're doing. I love this show.
You're a good man. Thank you. Hey, everyone wants to know, so who is Clint from a personal side to how did Silicon Slopes start out? Just give us a quick picture, because not everyone knows who you are, and this is a great new venue to be able to share your brand.
Yeah, for sure. I am Utah through and through, hence the Utah Jazz hat you're seeing. There's usually some sort of Utah paraphernalia on my body at some point throughout the day. So I love Utah, born and raised here, live here still, and really invested in the future of the state. And I think Silicon Slopes came from kind of this passion that I had for the state of Utah and its growth, and being able to inspire a next generation of entrepreneurs and leaders to make the state even better than we found it, right? And so I was running a software development firm in about 2011, 2012. We were working with early stage startups. We were helping them build their initial product or their MVP, and helping them get it to a point where they could transition to an in-house team. While we were doing that, we were working with some of the major tech companies that came out of Utah, that went public, that exited for billions of dollars. Like, the first people they talked to about their idea was us. It was fascinating. It was very exciting. And we were, we'd help them build this thing and think through. Some of them we even named at the software development firm. And we're sold for billions of dollars afterwards. And some of them are public companies right now. As we were doing that, we realized no one knew about them. Strangely enough, like, nobody was writing about these companies. This is like in the days of like TechCrunch. Remember when TechCrunch meant something, maybe it still does. I don't want to insult TechCrunch, but it was a really big deal to be written up in TechCrunch or something of that nature. And nobody was doing that for Utah. None of the local newspapers, anything like that, was kind of telling the story of these founders and entrepreneurs and what they were building, and the community that was kind of coming together around it. And so at the dev shop, we decided we would do it. And I bought the domain beehivestartups.com. I put no thought into it whatsoever. For those who don't know, Utah is the beehive state. And so I was like, all right, let's beehivestartups.com. And I just started writing, going around interviewing these entrepreneurs, writing their stories, publishing them. Nobody would read it. We had Google Analytics on the website. I told them to take it off because it was depressing. I mean, we're talking about a very niche audience, right? We're talking about like people who are interested in Utah tech startups. So the audience wasn't very big. And so we did this for about a year and a half, just went around and I just went around and interviewed these folks, wrote stories. I randomly majored in journalism in college, pointless thing to do, but it became a not so pointless, I guess, in this endeavor. And so would write these stories. And then we popped our head up about a year and a half in, and we realized we'd built a community because although no one was reading these stories in the broader world, right, the people who were reading them were the people we were writing about. These companies and these founders loved it, and they would share it around and with people they wanted to invest, or whatever it was, they really liked it because it wasn't a press release, right? It was kind of like their authentic story. And we realized at that point that we had a community, and our community was these people that we wrote about, these CEOs and these founders who were building something really interesting in the state of Utah. And it got to the point where these folks, these leaders, were pushing us to do events. Now, I'd never done an event in my life. I didn't even know what it meant to do an event, right? But they're like, hey, why don't you do events? Some of us will come speak at them every once in a while. And so I'm like, all right, we'll do an event. Started doing some events. They went okay. I want to say they're great. But we started doing some events where we basically just do fireside chats, and we do them at local colleges and things like that. And then one day I got a sponsorship check to Beehive Startups. I think it was like $10,000 sponsorship check. And it was from a local venture fund. And I called them and I said, hey, thank you for this. Beehive Startups doesn't have a bank account. There's no way to publish. There's no way to deposit this, right? Because the Beehive Startups wasn't the name of the dev shop. It was just the name of this blog that we were writing. And I said, I'm going to send it back to you. And he said, no, you're going to create a bank account. And you're going to deposit it. And then and I was like, oh, all right, cool. So that's how Beehive Startups came to be. And it really started to gain on with the community through these events, through these stories. An early win, an interesting thing that happened to us was there was this local news story where a bunch of bee rustlers, yeah, you heard that right, bee rustlers, had stolen bees from a local beekeeper, this 15-year-old beekeeper. His name is Bryce Bunderson. I still remember him very well. And as I was scrolling Twitter one day, again, this is early days of even Twitter, I just started laughing. Like, this kid was running a literal beehive startup. Our name, which we'd put no thought into, was Beehive Startups. It felt appropriate for us to help this beehive startup kid get his money back. I think they sold like $15,000 worth of bees, and they stole like the queen bees and honey. Anyway, there's a whole thing. I got like really into like bee rustling and things like that just because the name itself was cool. And so we were like, well, let's help this kid. And so we made a big deal out of the fact that, we were helping this beehive startup, and we made a video because back in those days with GoFundMe, they all had videos. I don't think that's true anymore, but it was pretty video heavy, where we had kind of all the major tech players in Utah appearing in the video, trying to raise this $15,000 for this kid. And it was fun. And we're driving up and down I-15, which is kind of the main highway in Utah, just laughing and having a good time about, the fact that he's running a Beehive Startups. Our name is Beehive Startup, and just how fun it was. And for whatever reason, I'm not entirely sure why, we saved our filming with Bryce Bunderson for last, him and his family. And as soon as we met them, it wasn't funny anymore. Like, we actually needed to do this because it was a big deal to the Bunderson family that they'd lost this amount of money and this equipment and, all of these beekeeping items. That was a big deal. Like, it put food on their plates. Like, it was no joke. And I still remember walking back to the car with the film crew that we brought along and saying, well, now we have to actually do this. Like, this is like, this just became very real. Like, we have to go make the difference for this Bunderson family. And we did. Like, the community stepped up and raised well over they needed. And, we even had a local bee company give them everything they lost, even some queen bees. It's like a crazy thing. It's like, but it showed me, what it taught me more than anything in those early days is just the power of community to give and be about something other than themselves. There's nothing about beekeeping that has anything to do with tech. And yet a bunch of tech entrepreneurs and tech CEOs and venture capitalists in the Utah community stepped up and gave back to this kid and this family who had been devastated by this loss. And it really was a good lesson for me, particularly for it to happen early on, in just what you can do as a community and to really kind of think outside of the box in ways you can serve and the impact you can have. So, anyways, that's a long answer to your question, but that started it. And then we created a nonprofit for Silicon Slopes, which Josh James had coined very early on. He did Omniture. He sold Omniture to Adobe for $1.8 billion in 2009, which was incredible, showing that in Utah, you could get a Silicon Valley exit without living in Silicon Valley. That was a huge deal. We should build a statue to him. But he had coined the phrase Silicon Slopes, and he'd had it inside of his new company, Domo, which is a public company now. And at some point, he was doing some things with like calendars and various events, and we kind of got the top tech leaders in the community together, created a 501c3 nonprofit, merged Beehive Startups because I put no thought into the name. He'd put a lot of thought into Silicon Slopes, right? That's a pretty thoughtful name. So we went with that, and here we are today, 10 years later.
Fantastic. What a story. Look at that. And not just 10 years later, Clint, hundreds of thousands of people affected, people flying in every year to speak. We're talking every key, marquee, celebrity, tech brand out there being represented on there. I don't think there's anybody you haven't had yet come out to speak and ultimately inspire everyone around. And of course, you've rubbed the shoulders with a lot of them. I want to keep asking you one more thing. So what's the future then of Silicon Slopes? Where is it heading? Just on Silicon Slopes, yeah.
Yeah, a lot has changed. Like when we first started this organization, events were kind of non-existent, to be honest with you. Like not a lot of people were organizing tech folks together, developers, whatever it was, the tech community in Utah. Now events are kind of ubiquitous. You guys kind of see this everywhere. Like events are not like a differentiator at all. And that was kind of what Silicon Slopes did for up until COVID, was we held a lot of events. We'd bring the community together, we convene. We obviously do summit, those types of things. And COVID really changed things, obviously, for everyone in the world, but particularly for an organization that was averaging about an event a day. Now, these are smaller events, but about an event a day to no events at all for 2.5 years. And figuring out how do we, organize and keep this community together if we're not doing it in person. And now coming out of COVID, we're still kind of in this interesting spot where I don't think events matter as much as they used to, right? It's not a differentiator even for attendees to go to an event, right? It's just not as big of a deal. And I'll give you an example of that. In 2020, the January of 2020, and if you'll remember, COVID hit March 2020. So we got this in right before COVID hit. We had 30,000 people at the Salt Palace in downtown Salt Lake City. We had Mark Zuckerberg coming on stage. Nobody had heard him speak too much. Like he wasn't as ubiquitous again as he is today. Like you can go to a podcast and listen to him for 3 hours, talk about like what he's doing. And that happens about every month or two, right? Which is fascinating. At that point in 2020, he'd only given a Georgetown University keynote speech in 5 years. Nobody had heard him really say anything. And he was in the midst of a lot of controversy around Russia and whether Russia helped with the election. I mean, there was like all these documents, you remember, like he's always in controversy, right? He's in some now. And so it was a big deal to have Mark Zuckerberg, on stage, and he live streamed it from his Facebook page. And it was just really, this fun thing, and millions of people saw it. It really put Utah on the map and that type of thing. And then COVID hits, and coming out of COVID, we had as big of a name, Tim Cook, come and speak, and it didn't hit the same way. Is that, and that has nothing to do with Tim. It's just kind of affect, like, I don't think Mark, it would hit the same way anymore. Like these events with these big tech luminaries, it's an interesting world we're living in. So where do we go from here? I think it's more curated connections. I think we'll still, obviously, it's really great for Utah and for those folks to come here and see what's happening and have them speak. But I think it'll be a little bit more curated in the sense of the type of connections and the type of knowledge you're wanting to get as an entrepreneur or somebody building a company. You're no longer will you just kind of go to an event for 2 days where people are up there on panels, right? I think it's a different environment, and that's what Silicon Slopes is working through right now, is how to make that more curated connections and make sure that everybody who walks into an event has the ROI, right? Again, you're talking to somebody who's not really an event planner. And so blowing it all up is great for me. Like I don't have any sacred cows as it comes to it. So that's kind of where we're at now with Silicon Slopes, is figuring out how we surround Utah entrepreneurs with everything they need in order to be successful.
Wonderful.
I can attest to that. Clint, I'm from SoCal, but I came to Silicon Slopes. I think number of connections I had, meetings, just run-ins, whatever, like 10 to 1 compared to the chats, the fireside chats or speeches that I listened to. It's like the most of it happened for me outside of right outside of the big screen area, arena area. Even when I went to the Startup Alley, it was a lot of connections around. So kudos to you guys doing those things. But there's something about Utah in general. Like people are so helpful. I don't know where that's coming from, and it's trying to be helpful without anything in return.
Yeah, well, I don't want to like overstate how great Utah is, but I obviously love it. We have here an ethos in the state of community that's kind of embedded, just given like the founding of the state was, a group of religious folks who came out of here to escape persecution. Over 50% of the population, as I understand it, is still members of that faith. And so it comes a little bit from that. Like there is this pioneer spirit because it was literally founded by pioneers, and this belief in community, because like you can only rely on the people around you, right? And so serve and give, and that kind of same types of stuff happens to you. As far as the tech community, though, Utah has a pretty rich tech history that I don't know that a lot of people know about. We were the fourth node of the internet and the first one outside of California when that happened. So that was crazy. And in the late 90s, probably 2 of the top 10 tech companies were in Utah, Novell and WordPerfect. And I mean, the CEO of Novell left to be the CEO of Google, Eric Schmidt, right? Like Utah has this really interesting tech history that has allowed it to have folks who can reach back and mentor the next generation because they've done it before, right? And that is the beauty of Silicon Valley. What makes Silicon Valley the mecca of startups and entrepreneurship, in my opinion, is the community that exists there and the amount of people who have been successful, who are willing to kind of give back and kind of help the next generation. And Utah has something very similar to Silicon Valley in that they have a lot of people who've had a lot of wins who want to kind of give back and help the next generation get as many wins.
That's why we're here, right? This is Fearless Founder is exactly for that. So can you maybe touch base on that a little bit, like maybe double click on that? You've probably seen, you probably have heard stories about how that actually happened, like mentoring the next generation, or maybe you have some thoughts about what founders should pay attention to these days, but landmines they can avoid. Let's start. There's millions of them, but I'm sure we'll dig into some of them.
Yeah, what I love about what you're doing is it is kind of all about the founder, right? And that's a big deal in a startup community. In fact, I firmly believe entrepreneurs and founders should lead startup communities. It shouldn't be VCs. And that is another unique thing about Utah, is that it is the entrepreneurs who are leading it. The founders of Silicon Slopes were all entrepreneurs. They were all founders, right, of companies. And the fact that they would get in a room and put their egos and logos at the door and talk about how to grow the community and not grow their companies, or like that type of, is nuts. That's super rare, right? And so What you want is to have founders who have that kind of servant mentality, who want to give for the sake of giving, right? Like if you've made it and you know, in our case, like one of our founders owns the Utah Jazz and the Utah Hockey Club, like he's made it, right? The fact that he's still like giving back and supporting the next generation of entrepreneurs is really quite remarkable. And so I think you need that in a community, particularly in a startup community. It should be led by entrepreneurs. And for whatever reason, that's not the case. I'm sure that you've seen like around the country and around the world, it's mostly run by VCs. And what they want, and VCs are great, right? They're an important, very important aspect of a startup community. But they want a very specific company, which kind of excludes about 99% of all other companies or founders or entrepreneurs, right? And so, yeah, I would say that has been really useful for the state of Utah is to have founders at the center of the community, kind of helping and leading and guiding everybody else.
I agree, and the fundamental thing that we've learned over time, not just from interviewing but also from running businesses ourselves, is that ultimately it's a lonely place, and the mind gets caught up in all of the what about if this happened, or what's going to happen if I don't talk to the board properly, or what if I can't raise enough? How do I address this difficult employee, and all these things come up, and you've faced it personally, and you've seen it in all of the interactions. So if I may, I'd love to find out from you, from having talked to Zuckerberg to whomever, are there a couple of 2-3 points that you see regularly coming up that founders should be aware of, prepare for, plan on experiencing? What sage advice can you provide from having hung around as well as being an operator yourself in the past?
Well, I will say, to touch on your first point, entrepreneurship is very lonely. Nobody cares what you're doing, right? That's a pretty interesting place to be in as an entrepreneur. Like nobody cares what you're doing. Like your family doesn't even care. They're just like, are you making money? Like, are you okay? Like, but they're not going to ask about it or get in debt. They don't care, right? And that is a very interesting, kind of crazy place to be in. And so, the only way to kind of find a community in that and to not be so lonely is to be around other founders and entrepreneurs who are experiencing something similar to you, who know what you're going through and care because it's happening to them, right? So I think you're dead on that point. In terms of things I've seen in other leaders that I would expect, like I would expect it to be bumpy, right? Like it never goes the way you plan. Everything always takes longer, costs more, is harder than you think it is in the whiteboard meeting, right? Whiteboard meetings are awesome because everything's possible on there, and all you have to do is draw it with a marker, and there it is, right? And then when you actually go into the real world and try to create it, it's a lot different. And I would expect just go in with the mindset of like, yeah, this is the journey is the point. The outcome is not the point, right? The journey is the point. Like the success and money and things that come with it are kind of irrelevant, actually. Like what you'll remember is the journey and being in those rooms and trying to figure things out and solving problems that seem insolvable. Like, how are we going to get around this speed bump? This is impossible. And then you get around it, and then everybody who was in that room and helped you get over it is now your friend for life. Like they're just like you went through something together, right? It's pretty beautiful. And so I would embrace the journey if I were an entrepreneur right now, particularly one at an early stage. I would love the fact and really embrace the fact that nobody cares about what you're doing. Like turn that on its head. Like that's actually a good thing. Now you have an opportunity to throw a lot of things up against the wall, see what sticks. And it doesn't matter if one of them doesn't stick because nobody cares what you're doing, right? That's not as possible with big, like it's not as possible even with Silicon Slopes. Like Silicon Slopes going to just announce something tomorrow and then a week later say it didn't work, we're out, or without any consequences, right? But at an early stage, you're able to do that, and there's a lot of learning and a lot of value that comes into that, I think.
I think you're absolutely right. I have to tell you this quick story. A long time ago, I ran into a particular neighbor who had his and her two-door convertible Rolls Royces parked. And I said, who are these people? And I went and found this Mr. and Mrs. Chen. And I just said, Mr. Chen, hi, I'm fairly ambitious, but I have no experience with businesses. May I interview you? Because I'd like to start a business one day. And he said, sure, come to my office on whatever. So I show up on in his office, and on one faraway corner was his partner and his wife, who was over all the accounting, and he was over everything else. And we sat down. I peppered him with questions, and I said, so how did you get started? He said, well, we were so poor, we were dumpster diving for couches for college, my wife and I. And then we figured out how to create a formula, because I was a chemist undergrad, and we figured out how to create makeup and things for the skin. And we ended up selling this part-time, and it got bigger and bigger and bigger. So I kept peppering, and then he said, stop. He said, stop. And he said, you're asking me questions on how to start a business and what to avoid and what to get. He said, I'm not going to answer any more of your questions. Go start one.
Yep, that's right.
He says, go start one. I've never forgotten that lesson. And I went, okay, all right, I'll do it, And that's how the journey goes. It's lonely. No one supports you, but you've got to do it. You've got to do it. And you have to enjoy the journey, like you said. But there are many milestones you're always looking for. And then you realize, oh my goodness, I crossed another chasm. I can breathe payroll one more time.
Yeah, that's right. Like, I don't think there's any substitute to start. Like if you haven't started one, like how would you know, right? Like, and that's why like repeat founders are so great, right? They understand, like, I don't know, this might work, this might not. Like what we even do 5 years from now might not work, but let's embrace the journey and embrace the problem we're trying to solve and figure out the best way to do it. Yeah, I think you got to start. That's probably the best piece of advice to give anyone is, you want to know how to do it? Go do it. Right.
Yeah, it's true. One of the things I've noticed you doing, though, is you were very quick to pivot. Maybe you don't think so, because you have to go through all the lumps and bruises. But I've loved how you've been able to take from Beehive Startup, Silicon Slopes, go around capturing stories, to small events, to big events. And now, since COVID, people aren't responding, so let's create more intimacy and connections at a different level. That's another component of a lesson I know plenty about. You got to move with what's happening and not stay stagnant and say, my original thesis is still it. We're not going to move. We're going to stay there. Then you die, right?
Yeah, you've got to constantly be changing your mind, right? Like we should have like strong beliefs loosely held. I think that's what Mark Andreessen said one time. I agree with that. Like have a strong belief in like, hey, it's important to have a community of entrepreneurs and founders who get together and support each other. How? Like, how we get there, that part kind of doesn't matter, right? As long as you're focused on that existing and the best way for that to exist.
I think we need to help our first-time founders do that, because that's a skill. I think when you're starting, there's a lot of fear-based decisions. Your emotions run you. When your second time it gets a little lower, the third time lower, but on the first one, everything is like extra boosted. And you got to have the conviction about your idea, your product, your service, right? But leaving the ego at the door and just listening to a customer, maybe the different idea or your co-founder's ideas is really hard, isn't it? Like to be able to do those pivots.
Oh yeah, and you've got to be willing to be wrong. You like if you're pivoting, you likely failed in some aspect, and like, great, right? Like I don't think the whole point of business is to fail, right? Like I think we sometimes celebrate failure too much, but as long as you're alive, meaning the company's alive and you're still going, be willing to take risks. Don't put all the chips in the middle of the table, but put a lot of them in there and kind of get a sense and trust your gut, trust your conviction. I think too often people are looking at kind of the main big celebrity entrepreneurs and CEOs and think they have something uniquely special or qualifying about them that makes it so only they can do that and I can't. And the thing that they have that a lot of people don't is one, short memories, willing to, like not taking the losses too hard, right? Like, yeah, we tried it, it didn't work, right? But we're still going ahead. We still believe in the mission. Let's keep going. And just this unwavering determination to succeed and not to fail, right? Probably even more not to fail than to succeed, right? We are going to keep this company alive no matter what. Like that, all the commonalities of every entrepreneur or CEO I've ever met, and they all have different leadership styles, different ways of talking, different, methods for leading their companies, different even revenue models, all that type of stuff, right? Each one is completely different. The one commonality I've always seen is this relentless drive to not fail. Like we will figure this out, right? I think more than anything else, that's what entrepreneurship is. It's like being open and understanding to the idea that you are going to make a lot of mistakes. Don't let that get to you to where it starts affecting your thought process or your confidence and all these various things, right? To where you start just making a mistake after mistake after mistake. Just learn from them and move. Like you got to move quick, you got to move fast, you got to make decisions. And if it's wrong, just figure out why it was wrong and keep going.
One of the things that I have always thought about, had to go through. I did 4 startups from scratch, Clint, and 3 with existing teams. That's 7. And along the journey, always with outside money, angel seed or VC. And what I figured out was in successive rounds that it's not about having the perfect formula. It's about reinventing it along the way without letting your confidence sag.
That's right.
You just go and move fast. The quicker the mistakes are made, the quicker the adjustments can be made, the quicker you can move on to solving the problem versus is it me? Just got to go to the objective and be more accurate, not rely upon, will I be viewed as being weak? Will I give off an aura of desperation unwittingly? All of those are just me. Just if you just focus on solving the problem, it makes it so much easier to keep the flywheel going. And I'm talking a lot more, but just had to tell the rest of our viewers today of my personal experience in that. And as I now coach these first-time founders who've been VC funded or now in a growth and needing to scale, I see them have a level of confidence that wasn't there at the very start because they can now brush it off. It's okay. Let's go solve this. It's not a long time stewing. It's a short-term pivot and let's go execute. And that has continued to be my recipe for trying anything new. Let's just go do it. So, and it's particularly with the younger generations, this overthinking and making it perfect is the death knell. It is not going to help anyone.
Yeah. So, then you never launch and you never get started. Something I would add to that, we were talking about mental health a little bit earlier and how lonely it is. And there is a mental health crisis in the tech community, at least here in the state of Utah, there is.
Yes.
And I think generally in the entire United States, right? Like there's a mental health crisis here. And I think part of the reason why we take it so personally when we fail or, we've made the wrong decision and now we got to, figure out the consequences for that is we tie our identity to what we're doing. Like we are the company we're building, right? We're like the physical embodiment of the company we're building, right? When in all actuality, you're not, right? And if you can kind of pull yourself away from being tied to the success or failure of a company, that is so freeing. That is like one of the biggest things I would try to tell founders or entrepreneurs is like, you are not your company, right? Like your entire identity should not be wrapped up in your company. There's more to life than whether your company succeeds or fails. And by the way, nobody really cares that they do either.
Yeah.
So come on, don't tie your entire identity, everything you are as a person, to that thing. It doesn't make any sense, right? We wouldn't do that in any other aspect of our lives. Or when you do, you say hey, that's a problem. You have a problem, right? It's a problem to tie your entire identity and who you are as a person to the company you're running and leading.
You've done a fabulous job of having these every month, mental health sort of online forum in which you have experts coming online and giving their advice. You're acutely in touch with that, Clint. Thumbs up. I couldn't agree more. Ike knows that. We talk about the unconscious incompetent element that underlines and undermines every effort made, and it's fear. It's worry about self. It's the stories that we're instantly making up, since we're all meaning-making machines, is what I learned a long time ago,
Yeah.
right? Because it's just automatic, and yet that's the worst thing you can do. And yet we're in
And
that
it's wrong. I think it's really important for people to understand that it's wrong. It's what are people going to think of me if I fail, or what are people going to think of me if I succeed? Both of those are the wrong questions to be asking, because the answer is no one's thinking about you at all. Right? They're all doing the exact same thing you're doing. What is everybody thinking of me? Whatever, the truth is, just work and be who you are, and don't be anything else.
It's interesting that as I've gone through 5 kids and teenagers that are all grown up now, it's almost like they revert to that teenage stage of they shine the spotlight on themselves. And I'm going, no, dude, that's the incorrect posture. That's a sure recipe to fail. Turn that light off. We don't care. We don't care.
That's right. And it's just not the way to do it for your own self-worth, it gives the wrong vibe and impression. It's just it's not healthy.
And how are you going to attract employees or investors if you give off this needy, insecure, this whole aura around you is tainted? And Ike is laughing because he knows my kids and the teenage stages they've gone through. Dude, you're not very attractive right now to many people.
It's not at home. Your employees can smell the fish. The investors, your co-founders, customers can feel the desperation when you're negotiating, all that. But but the founders has to find, first step is to recognize that you're creating a lot of stories in your head. Like you said, maybe people don't care, or they probably don't think as much as you think about you. Everybody has their own lives. Maybe get a coach. I talk to other founders, because sometimes you can't talk to the board members, you can't talk to your family, you certainly can't talk to your employees. The only way is sometimes these the founder over a lunch that nobody can hear what we're talking about, the challenges, the board and the customers and the marketplace and all the things happening. But once you recognize it, you need to find your channel, right? To get to the light.
And I think, tell me what you guys think about this. I think entrepreneurship is about to become even more lonely. I think it's going to be possible to do it with a lot less employees. I think Sam Altman was right when he says we may see the first $1 billion startup founded and taken all the way to $1 billion by one person, a solo entrepreneur. AI is kind of doing that. And it's interesting too that VC may not play the same role as it has in the past, given all of that, right? And so how are you guys thinking about what advice are you giving your founders around raising money, and how AI is for sure changing all of this, everything we've known for the past 20 years, and how to build a startup might not be relevant soon?
Ike is our man on AI.
That's a loaded question. I am building a new company with AI, everything AI. I have a tiny team all over the world. We don't even share an office. the biggest time my co-founder and I share is at Starbucks, because everything is done online. I haven't met any of my developers face to face once, right? And things are going fast. This is growing faster than what I was doing before. But at the same time, the pressure to make your company unique is high, because anybody, if I'm doing any just with AI, like I'm not adding any value or moat, it is so easy to be okay. Like that $1 billion company we talked about with one person, if they're not careful, they can be replaced within 2 months if they're not careful, right? Somebody can build the same software if they have no moat, and have a bigger marketing budget and go on Instagram and Facebook and whatever the thing is, and capture the customers and offer, the 30% off, especially the software has no way to stick around because you made it so easy to integrate, right? You have to make it easy to integrate because that's how you're going to get to $1 billion. But that also, so like some things are easy for sure, and it is lonelier for sure, but it's founder's job to make sure that company is sustainable over the long haul. You're not replaceable. You have modes to keep building the enterprise value. So you got. I think entrepreneur always has challenges, right? Things are not getting easy. It's just the challenges shift from one to another, and the loneliness is one of them. You got to find your route.
Clint, I have another perspective on this, as I'm coaching many of these people. And what I've noticed is that the efficiencies are going to increase, less labor allocated, but the ability to communicate, connect, build rapport, trust, whether it be from investors to customers and to the few employees and partners, that's a skill that's actually going to be more needed because of the reclusive nature of how nowadays, and you can see it in some of the young people, where they're in the same room looking at their phone and not knowing how to build rapport. And definitely the males are not going to ask the girls to initiate a conversation, never mind a dance or a date. And this is a continuing theme that I see. And there's a need to almost definitively improve the skills of connection. Back to your original statement. Yes, I think the entities are going to be much more nimble, less burdened with the drama of humans, but there will be a more to hone your skills at the few times that you do interact to make it so effective, instead of becoming a blubbery mess and being very poor in choice of words and confidence and posture and everything else. There's an even higher need now to deliberately focus on that. Whilst in the olden days, water cooler, passing through each other, going out on lunch dates, you acquire those skills even if you didn't know them as a developer coming on the job for the first time. But now I think everybody needs to focus on those elements. I see it waning because it's easy, but choose your hard, right?
Yeah.
Choose your hard. You want to do it later when it's more difficult and you got a higher risk of opportunity cost, or do it now and learn those skills. That's my perspective.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that's beautifully stated. Yeah. It's interesting how important community, human connection, and the ability to communicate will be in this future, right? Like I think those things there's going to be a premium on those three things. In a way, there's always been a premium on those. Let's be honest, but even more so now, given the way everything else is going.
Indeed. And you see it a lot. You're seeing it, you're at the hub and spoke level, not just within Utah, but throughout the community of tech, because you kept in touch with all of these luminaries as well. You're seeing the trends happen. You can see the avalanche that's coming our way, right? Hence, and I'm going to ask you this question: what are you doing? And I'd like you to consider this too. What are you doing as operators to keep ahead? What are the worries that you have now? You've already voiced one in particular. They're saying, the fact that we're going to have less and less people involved is a good thing and a bad thing as well. What's on top of mind so that our viewers and listeners can say, "Oh, Clint's still worried about that," or Ike, it's his second, third time, and he's still thinking about that. What's on your top of mind that you're wrestling with as a business owner?
I think, I mean, I don't know that changes as much as top of mind and biggest problem is how do you serve your customer? How do you make your customer happy? How do you make them feel like what they're doing with your company, whether you're providing a service or a product, they come away walking like, yeah, that was awesome. That's all. That's what you want. You want them to feel like it was worthwhile and you're providing a genuine service, right? And how you do that changes. And so that's all my worries is like, how do we serve entrepreneurs in this new environment? How do we do that if we can't all meet together during COVID, right? Like, so the challenges are directly related to how do you serve your customer? And the only way to have an understanding of that is to talk to them.
Yeah.
To see what's going on and see the best way that you could be helpful.
Well done. Well said. Ike, what are your thoughts on that topic? You got a new startup again.
Yeah. Jeff Curl, I said this, like I heard it from him once. Are you a vitamin? Are you a painkiller? And he said the best companies are medicines and not vitamins, not painkillers, right? So you can't do that in an automated way. You can't do that from the office. You have to get out and talk to the customers. And that means in two ways. You just can't rely on the tech. Hey, I know this problem. I know how to solve it theoretically. Like, even if you have an idea, you have to go find out the real pains, solve them with the customer and do it. So I think that's the only way to create medicine type products and companies, in my opinion. So like, that's one aspect. The other one is, I don't know if you noticed, but in the technology, especially with AI, things are changing faster and faster and faster. It's at incredible pace. It's unlike anything before. I live it. So the founders have extreme pressure on watching out what the technology is doing, what's going to come out next, so that I am the one talking to my customers, telling them, here's how I can solve your problem with this, new technology. If you don't do that, your competition will. And it's an extreme pressure.
Good. Yeah, I see that. And I can see Clint agreeing on that. Let me share with you what I think of regularly. And that is in this, Clint, you hit it on the head with AI making things simpler, and smartphones and everything else making, instant information accessible, everything. What I'm focused and preparing is how can I help founders steel themselves and mentally be strong so that their programming is built on confidence and I can do it and I can make things happen, because everything that's coming at them says, I'm small, I'm insignificant, I don't know enough, I don't have what others have. The comparison game, for example, it's just too easy to make them wilt in confidence. And the more I'm been thinking about the impact I want to make, it's more around how to create a titanium spine that allows them to withstand the buffetings and all of the challenges at the breakneck speed that it's happening at, right? And how to be self-aware enough to even catch themselves going down the wrong train of thought, because that's what all of this is doing to the frail mind that never had to grow up farming and learning the discipline of effort equals confidence. Effort equals you can do hard thing. Effort, physical effort means you can push yourself. For now, we live in too much ease, and so everything that's coming is causing more of a clouded perspective of who am I, can I do it, and doubt. That's what I'm seeing happening in the tech community particularly. So my entire thesis is how to create, I got a little formula that Ike knows, that your leadership effectiveness can be enhanced with training, effort, and your talent, but they're undermined by fear. So if we can get that denominator number to be theoretically equal 1 or less, that would be lovely. Then it amplifies everything that you do in terms of impact. But everything is going against it, and the denominator, that fear element, that unconscious incompetence, is rising to 2, 3, 4, 5, and it's decimating any effort, any training, any talent up top in that formula. And so it's been a very deliberate strategy. As I encounter one individual at a time who has an impact on many, how can you, first of all, put the oxygen mask on and see with clarity, and then help the rest of the team get out of the fear funk that just permeates. It starts from the top, and there's a lot of that going on. And you know that. You've seen it.
Yeah.
So
I think that's very accurate.
Hey, we're going to run out of time. I got to give you this opportunity. What's going on with CEO.com? I love the idea. How did it start? Where's it going with CEO.com? I think people need to know about this great new business that you've created. And
well, it's similar to everything I've been working on and still work on at Silicon Slopes. But it's not based on a region. It's based on a topic, which is leadership and being the CEO of a company. And we talk to CEOs from around the world and ask them these questions and have conversations like the one we just had here. And we bring them together. We bring CEOs together in small curated groups to kind of learn from each other, and not a lot of programming around it. Again, it's like really interesting. Like previously we would have done a lot of programming. Now it's just like, nah, just go get coffee with each other and see what happens. You know what I mean? And there's more value that comes out of that. And so, yeah, that's what CEO.com is. It's for leaders. It's giving them everything they need in order to be successful is the idea behind it. We also, we put out a lot of content. We do a podcast, we do a magazine, we put out articles, those types of things, all around kind of the subjects we talked about today.
fantastic. Is that cool, Ike? Did you
Yeah,
know
very
that?
cool. What are the stages of these companies that see CEOs?
Well, we have public companies all the way to early stage startups and everything in between. Yeah.
Yeah, nice. Very cool.
Clearly, this man, Clint, is doing tons of things. So I have to ask, because work-life balance, how are you tackling all of this? How do you pace yourself? How is this mini Elon Musk speed being maintained? Clint?
I'm nowhere near to his speed.
No one is. No one is.
Who knows how he does any of that? I don't know. Just wake up every day and try to work on cool stuff and try to keep my sanity. You know, like it's kind of as simple as that. And if it has been harder over the years to say no to things, I think I'm getting better and better at saying no and focusing on, you know, where we can make the most impact and the things that we can do that we uniquely can provide the most value on. But yeah, that's it. I mean, it's just, hey, there's no such thing as work-life balance as far as I'm concerned. There's just life. And, you know, you just try to serve and give the best you can every day and see what happens.
Ike, what a beautiful man, eh?
I agree.
Isn't he great? He's been such a linchpin, such a cornerstone for Utah tech scene. Clint, thank you very much. Much appreciate you, man.
Thank you.
Thank you, not only for being here, but also helping lots of first-time founders. I think I know that firsthand in the Silicon Slopes, but everything else also you're doing. If anybody didn't tell you, I'm telling on behalf of all the founders. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. What an honor to be here. Keep doing what you're doing. This is really cool.
Thank you. Our own luminary from Utah. Thanks, man. Much appreciated.
Thanks,
We'll see you guys next time. Thanks, Clint.
See you guys. Thank you so much. That was fun.